Ladies and gentlemen, seekers of light and secret knowledge wherever you may be, you are listening to Points of Light Radio, the podcast dedicated to taking you past the apron and behind the closed doors of lodges everywhere. And here is your host, Stan Miller.
Greetings, brothers and sisters. Shalom, assalamu alaikum. It's wonderful to be back with you here on Points of Light Radio and continuing this journey with you. I'm enjoying this journey, and I hope you feel the same way about it. Now, here on Points of Light Radio, we're going to continue our journey by shedding light on a branch of the Oddfellows that even many Oddfellows have never heard of. It's called the Patriarchs Militant. Just to give you some insight, the Patriarchs Militant is the highest branch of the independent order of Oddfellows. My research shows that the Patriarchs Militant was first organized in 1885 by members of the encampment who were military men and Civil War veterans. Patriarchs Militant were officially adopted as a separate branch of Odd Fellowship. It's an appendant body, shall we say, of Odd Fellowship. As from my research shows that there is only one degree, but this is where I'm going to stop explaining, because my guest today is a gentleman named Mike Duminiak. He's the military advisor for the Patriarchs Militant USA, right? And if anybody could really shed some light on this organization, it's him. And I'm so happy to be able to do this, because the Patriarchs Militant is an organization I've been trying to feature here on Points of Light Radio for almost a year. So I'm actually excited about this because, well, I got, my perseverance has paid off. So as I said, I can't wait to get started. So let's go fellowship with Mr. Dominiak. But as I always ask you, are you still thirsty for knowledge? Are you still searching for the light? And brothers and sisters, just trim your lamp and follow me. Okay. Mr. Dominiak.
Good to see you.
Points of Light Radio.
Just clicking your message that you're recording. There we go.
Okay, so you are the military advisor for the Patriarchs Militant USA.
That is correct.
Why don't you tell my listeners and viewers about yourself first?
Well, there's not a whole lot to say. I'm a middle-aged guy. I joined the Odd Fellows in 2006, went to the Patriarchs Militant in 2007.
Okay.
And I've been involved at pretty much every level of the organization. At the local level, which is the canton, been a canton commandant, which is the presiding officer of that body.
Okay.
I've been the department commander of a jurisdiction. And then I've also served as a staff officer for the General Military Council quite a number of times since 2010.
Okay. Now tell us a little bit about the Patriarchs Militant. Now, I understand it's the military branch or uniform branch of the Odd Fellows.
Yeah, it's not a military branch. So that's where people get confused. Militant as an adjective in this case means in a military style. So that involves the way that we dress with uniforms, the fact that we do drill and marching, but not military. Although If you were in the military, you're more than welcome to belong, and you're allowed to wear whatever awards and ribbons you earned in the military on your uniform, along with the ones from the Odd Fellows.
Okay.
But the branch primarily, we like to call it the showpiece of the order. There are a lot of ceremonies and public events that the Patriarchs Militant can do. And because we have a uniform, we stand out more, and it becomes something that the public can be interested in and want to learn more about. We also have two ceremonies that we do that basically give one of them gives the highest award you can receive in Odd Fellowship, which is the Grand Decoration of Chivalry. That is only done by this branch.
Okay. And so the whole idea of the uniform is really just to raise the profile of it, is it, or is that what it is, or?
Well, yeah, it's a funny thing. It goes all the way back to the history of the branch. There was a prohibition by the Odd Fellows on wearing any regalia in public.
Okay.
This is the way it was in the 1800s. You couldn't wear anything out in public. The only time you might be allowed to wear anything would be like a funeral badge when you're doing a funeral procession. And there was a group of people who wanted to be more out in public, who wanted to show off that they were Odd Fellows. And many other fraternal organizations had uniforms or uniformed branches, and they wanted to do the same thing in the Odd Fellows. And it was a multi-year fight before this branch eventually was formed.
Okay, wow. Now, what are the qualifications to join? Could you join, right, so shall we say, from the first degree of Odd Fellowship, or do you have to be raised to the different degrees?
Currently, to join the Patriarchs Militant, you have to be a member of the Royal Purple Degree of Encampment. So if you think of the structure of Odd Fellowship, you start with your lodge, and you get initiated in with initiatory degree. Then you have the first, second, and third degrees that follow, the degrees of friendship, brotherly love, and truth. After that, you can join an encampment, which is the next level up the ladder. If you're familiar with York Rite Masonry, for example, it would be similar to going from lodge to chapter. But these are called encampments, and they have 3 degrees as well: the Patriarchal degree, the Golden Rule degree, and the Royal Purple degree. Once you've attained the Royal Purple degree, then you're eligible to join a canton, where we just have 1 degree.
Okay, wow. Now, what exactly does the Patriarchs Militant do? Like, do they do the same things like fundraising and things like that that the Odd Fellows do? Right, a lot of good works, or are they simply there for the ceremony?
Well, that depends. And that's the one thing that's maybe unique about the Odd Fellows in general, is that there are some national programs, but what local lodges, local encampments, and local cantons choose to do is very much up to them on what sort of involvement they want with their community. There are cantons that are very active in fundraising, in putting on memorial services, in supporting veterans cemeteries and putting out wreaths and flags and that sort of thing. And then there are other cantons whose primary purpose is to just give the degree and be available for installation ceremonies or decoration ceremonies. Okay. It really runs the gamut across the country.
Okay. And of course, at members' funerals, you would also have maybe a military from your canton. They would have a uniform presence there.
Yes, if the member had been in the Patriarch Militant branch,
okay,
then we would have an honor guard. Usually, you have one at the head of the casket, one at the foot of the casket, and then you'll have an officer in charge who will then rotate out the guard at various periods to give them a moment of rest. We also would form beside the graveside or outside of the funeral location for the casket to be moved.
Okay, so like, when does your canton meet, and how long are the meetings?
My canton meets on the 3rd Tuesday of every month after our regular lodge meeting.
Okay.
And we meet for about an hour. It takes a certain amount of time to do the opening drill, and then we have our regular meeting, and then we have a closing drill. It's similar to, any lodge would have an opening and closing ritual, except ours involves marching around the room and, sword movements and all sorts of things like that.
Okay. And do you have to wear the uniform to your meetings?
Well, okay.
Oh, yeah.
The rule is that within 90 days, you should have a uniform that matches your rank and position. But a new member who comes in may not get a uniform put together right away. Now, we have multiple uniforms. For most canton meetings these days, people are wearing a Class B uniform, which is a pair of black pants or trousers or a skirt for women. It has a gold stripe down the leg. And then there's a white uniform style shirt that's short sleeve. And then on that, you put your brass and your ribbons. And then you have a ball cap or a garrison cap, depending on your chosen uniform of the day in your canton. What I'm wearing now with the full coat is the Class A uniform. And those are usually required at department meetings, which would be your state or multi-state jurisdiction, depending on where you are, and at the General Military Council meetings.
So who decides what uniform to wear at that canton meet, like at that particular, say, canton meeting?
The uniform is set by the presiding officer.
Okay.
So that's the uniform of the day. Now, there are some things that require a Class A uniform. You cannot test for sword proficiency without being in a Class A uniform. You cannot perform the Decoration of Chivalry or the Grand Decoration of Chivalry without being in a Class A uniform. But regular business meetings can be in a Class B, and you can certainly do a Class B for parades and things like that, especially if it's going to be out in the heat.
Okay. Now, I know here in Canada, at least, the Patriarchs Militant, their numbers have suffered a little bit. Now, what do you feel that the Patriarchs Militant need to do, shall we say, to move forward, to go forward and as an organization?
Well, thankfully, the branch is one of the few that has shown growth
Good.
at different times over the past decade. But like any other branch of the order, and particularly ours, what you need to do is be relevant.
Okay.
There is no point in having a meeting where the only people who show up are the people who are already in it. Nobody else ever sees you and would have no reason that you exist or to join. So working with your Grand Lodge to have a uniform presence for opening and closing sessions of Grand Lodge or for installation of officers, getting out and participating with funerals or parades, the sort of things that say you're not just paying more dues so that you can go to another meeting, that we actually have a purpose.
Yeah.
And this is what we're going to do. And around the country, we have very active cantons that do a lot of those things, but there's also places where the cantons don't do much of anything except come to their own meetings. And that goes for a lodge the same. If you have a lodge that only shows up, pays bills, talks to each other, and then leaves and never gets out in the community, never does anything for anyone to see, it's very hard to recruit.
True, very true. I agree with you. And, let me ask you though, what drew you first of all to the Oddfellows?
I used to work in a town called Bellefonte, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And I worked with children with diagnosed mental illnesses and their families, trying to help them, manage that. And that involved a lot of driving around. And I would regularly drive by a building that said Independent Order of Oddfellows on it. And I had no idea what it was. And I thought, but that sounds like a cool name. Maybe I'd like to join that. But there was never anybody there. The parking lot was always empty. There were chains up across to keep people from parking there in the off hours. And, well, I sort of forgot about it. I left. I moved to Virginia. I worked there. Then I moved to Philadelphia and worked there. And then I found my way back to central Pennsylvania. And I was living in a little town of 600 people. and got to know other people in the town. And one was the member of an Oddfellow Lodge, and the lodge was down to its last few members. He was afraid it was going to close, and he asked me and one of his sons to join, and we did. When we came in, they weren't really sure how to do the degree work fully. It was a interesting degree, but they hadn't brought anybody in 20 years.
Wow.
And, when we came in, then we invited other people we knew, and the lodge grew quite quickly, and we got very proficient. We were able to do all of the degrees live and with all the costumes and all the work, and that also then revitalized the encampment that was in a neighboring town, and then helped to revitalize the canton. And really, that's all it takes. If you can get one or two people that are new to come in, and you show them kindness and give them interest and let them be involved, and not just say, well, sit over there and be quiet, makes a big difference. I was very fortunate. As I said, Sam had invited us to join, but there was a secretary of that lodge, Don Trulick, who belonged to everything. And he knew everything. I mean, had everything memorized. He was just fantastic. He could do his part in the industry degree, but the other guys weren't sure what they were doing. And he basically taught me everything I know about Oddfellowship. Unfortunately, he passed away in a car accident a number of years ago, but he's the one that encouraged me to go on and get into the encampment, to go to the canton, and to attend Grand Lodge. And it was by attending Grand Lodge that I met Sovereign Grand Lodge and General Military Council officers who had come to visit our jurisdiction. And I play the bugle. I learned that in the Boy Scouts. And when they found out I played the bugle, they said, hey, we need a bugler for the General Military Council. In a couple of years, when the next guy was going to be installed, he said, would you do it? And that's how I ended up going to Sovereign Grand Lodge and General Military Council sessions. And it's been a great time. I go every year. Now, for people who aren't super familiar, in the Patriarchs Militant branch, you don't get any money. And so we say it's volunteer, obviously, because every organization is, but I mean, it's really volunteer. So when you have to travel to Victoria, British Columbia 1 year, and then go to Winston-Salem, North Carolina the next year, and then go out to Fort Worth, Texas, and then go up to Rapid City, South Dakota, that's out of your pocket. You have to pay for all the hotels and the travel and all of that. So I would say those who are part of this branch of the order and who attend the General Military Council are probably your most dedicated Oddfellows that you can find. Representatives to the Sovereign Grand Lodge do get a small amount of money. It's not enough to cover the cost, but it's something. Whereas we cover it all ourselves because we care that much.
And I think you've hit on something there in some of those things you said, that people say that fraternalism in general, people aren't as interested in it anymore, but the way you've talked, yeah, you've had it wasn't hard to grow your lodge. Once you started opening it up a little bit, showing people you were there, raising your visibility, welcoming, as you put it, new members and getting them involved almost right away. That is one way to really grow a lodge. People are not necessarily adverse to being parts of lodges anymore.
No, I think obviously there are people who are not going to be joiners of anything. There are those. But there are plenty of people who are looking for somewhere to fit in, somewhere that they can have meaning. One of the best parts of being an Oddfellow is that we're not as regimented. You join a lodge and you come in with ideas of what you would like to do, and the field is open for you to pursue that. We don't have just one charity that you have to put all of your effort into, whether you like it or not. You know, we basically let you do whatever is going to work for your community. Every lodge has its own character. Same goes for the encampments and the cantons. When I decided to start a canton in Charleston, West Virginia, where I work, it wasn't difficult to find enough people who wanted to try it out, even though they were going to have to go buy uniforms and put all that extra money and cost in to get up to snuff. And it's been going gangbusters. We haven't had any troubles, and we've gotten new members in.
That's wonderful. And so what would you say to those thinking of joining Odd Fellowship and, of course, the Patriarchs Militant? What would you say to them that are thinking about that?
I would hope that if they contact the Grand Lodge or the local lodge, that they would get a quick response. That's not always the case, unfortunately. A lot of our officers are retirees, and because they have the time to serve as a state officer. I'm Grand Secretary in West Virginia, and I can tell you it's not easy to do being a jurisdictional secretary when you work a full-time job and have other things as well. I have children still, in school age. So in most places, it's retirees that hold the offices, and they're not always as quick on the email or things like that as others are. However, if you're interested and you want to join or you want to find out more about it, there are plenty of people who will help you in that process, even if there's not a lodge in your local area. It is not that difficult to start a new lodge. In fact, starting a new lodge or a new encampment or a new canton is often easier than revitalizing a lodge that's sort of gotten stuck. Mm-hmm. Because when you start a new one, everybody who's coming in is energized to do it. When you're trying to revitalize a lodge, there are people who maybe just don't feel like doing that. And it's a little bit like, pushing a Cadillac with 4 flat tires. It can be a little difficult. But they're supported every level. And with this branch, look, you could call up the general commanding on his phone number, which is listed and it appears in our publications, and he'd take your phone call and talk to you and help you set it up. Good. I mean, that's the sort of people that we have. Nobody's full of themselves for, what office they might hold or anything else, because what's most important is preserving what we do.
Excellent. Well, Mr. Dominiak, I really appreciate your time today and come out here and teaching us about this, and all the best to you and your encampment there and your cantons. It's been wonderful talking to you.
Well, thanks for having me, and I hope that you will sign up as an Odd Fellow and then work your way up to the encampment and then on to the Patriarchs Militant.
Thank you, sir. Have a great day.
You too.
Mike Duminiak, brothers and sisters. Right. Wasn't it wonderful to see him here today and fellowship with him? Right. I love that he wore his uniform as well, because, it's part of some of the points that I'm about to cover. First of all, we all know what a Masonic lodge is when we pass it. Even most people do, right? But he talked about when he passed an Odd Fellows Lodge many, many years back, he didn't know what Odd Fellowship was all about. There was never anybody there, right? He never saw any of them around, right? So he didn't know what it was, and it's probably why he didn't join many years earlier. But, I've had that same experience, not just with the Odd Fellows, but with other lodges, right? We don't know. There's never seems to be anybody there. So what is it about? Right. And it leads to some thoughts I've covered in other segments. Well, maybe that's why some of these organizations are losing so many members and not growing. Right. But, but that's part of what the Patriarchs Militant is about, and what he's tried to do with his fresh thinking and part of his fresh thinking and new ideas is raising that profile, being out there where people can see you, opening the lodges up. And it's, here's another thing. I've said this before about Freemasonry, how there seems to be something for everyone. But if there is an Odd Fellowship too, once you get involved, and if you allow yourself to become involved in it, like I covered in an earlier segment, the Muscovites. For Odd Fellows who just want to have fun, there's the Muscovites, or or some of the other organizations I've covered, or the Odd Riders as well, which I haven't covered, but I've been trying to. Okay. And of course, for those who like a little bit more regimentation and visibility, there's the Patriarchs Militant that you've seen here today, right? And I want to get back to is fresh thinking and new ideas. If it comes back to some of the points that have been raised by previous guests and myself as well. If you want to grow your lodge or your chapter or your encampment, you can do that, right? Because it's obvious from what we've saw today and in other segments of Points of Light Radio, right? There are still many people who are open to fraternal membership, but we need to bring them in and get them involved, as he talks about getting them involved. If they want to be involved, get them involved from a very early stage in their membership. That the most junior members of a lodge or an encampment or whatever, a chapter, can be involved and can feel like they're part of it, right? And it's wonderful to see that Odd Fellowship is alive and it's growing, right? And it's great to see that there again, his goals are the same as mine. We need to raise the awareness and the visibility of these organizations and preserve their history, right? And I finally, after a year of trying, my perseverance paid off. I finally got to shed some light and fellowship with the Patriarchs Militant, right? I would love to have him back here and talk some more. But unfortunately, that's all the time I have today, brothers and sisters, for talking, because we've got to move on here. So before I go, I want to remind you that this podcast is available on both YouTube and Spreaker. Please share, like, and subscribe when viewing Points of Light Radio on YouTube. I also welcome your comments and input. I really do want to know how you feel about the journey we're taking and what your experience with it is, right? And you can follow and leave some comments as well on my Facebook page at facebook.com/Points of Light Radio. My Twitter handle is at PO Light Radio. You can see the link to my Spotify channel in the details section of this podcast, as well as my Points of Light Radio store. Brothers and sisters, I'm sorry to part with you, but until we meet again, just step into the light.